Hi and welcome everyone. Fire Talk here. This is my epoch. So what I'm going to be talking about today is homelessness and mental health because it's a big issue out here. There's a lot of people are that are homeless that deal with mental health issues. Some are major issues, which are a lot of the people that you see out on the streets. You know, when you walk down the street, you see the homeless. You are going to see a few people that are like me just because we're blending in, but we generally try and stay out of sight. Most of the people that you're going to see are those that are addicts and those that are dealing with severe mental health issues. And a lot of people say that the homeless crisis and the mental health crisis are both one and the same because if you can't, well, they've even figured it out. Like if your mind can't work, if you cannot function properly to be able to do menial tasks through the day, well then you're defunct in a lot of ways. Okay, so the mental health issue is what is leading to the other issues in which we see. At least that's the modern theory in which we have now. I was listening to a conversation between a police officer and a banker while I was in the next room talking to a different banker. And they were talking about how homeless or how mental health, there's just not enough service. There's just not enough help out there. And I don't really think that that's the problem. And I'm going to kind of highlight a few instances of some experiences that I've had dealing with mental health because for the first 25 years, or actually for most of 25 years, I was wrongly diagnosed with a mental health condition. And so I got to experience a lot of the problems that are wrong with the mental health industry for a lot of different reasons. And I'm going to go through, I'm going to explain this to you. From experience to kind of draw a correlation. So please follow the bouncing ball. So the first thing you got to deal with when you're dealing with mental health is getting a proper diagnosis. Now, I remember back, I think it was like 2002, 2003, I was in Dallas, and I had to go see a mental health counselor, and then they had to sit there and see about getting me a diagnosis. And I told them, well, I have PTSD, and that's all I have, or at least that's all I've been told that I have. And then I was, as I went over there and I got to sit down with the guy, he's like, no, you're bipolar. And I'm like, I'm bipolar. I've never been diagnosed with bipolar. They've done all kinds of tests because my mom was bipolar. So I knew that this doctor really didn't know what he was talking about. Come to find out, this doctor was diagnosing you with either schizophrenia or bipolar. So if you either fit into one of two categories, and so therefore he prescribed things. So now you are getting not only wrongly diagnosed, but you are also getting the wrong medication, which has its negative effects because you're changing the chemistry of your body and you're changing it in a way that's causing more harm. And especially when you're dealing with homelessness, these doctors that were like the bottom of their class, a lot of the times those are generally the people that you would deal with. It's not like that as much anymore. You have people that care, but it's not nearly as prevalent as it used to be with incompetent quack doctors. Okay, so getting wrongly diagnosed and then getting the wrong medication, that used to happen a lot. Okay, now let's talk about the care of mental health. So they kept telling me, oh well, you have panic attacks, and I'm like, okay, panic attacks. Well, yeah, you black out, you have panic attacks. So once we got in the diagnosis and we sat back and we started having the conversation about what was really going on with me. They're like, oh, well, you black out, so therefore you have panic attacks. And I kept saying, yes, I black out, but I also get violent when I black out. Are you sure this is a panic attack? Because I talk to lots of people and they say that they black out, they pass out, they fall, they hit the ground. I get violent. Is that a panic? Oh yeah, you got a panic attack. You got a panic attack. Well, dealing with that. Sorry about that. Dealing with that means that you also have to deal with that, going through the whole process of dealing with that specific mental health condition. Because now that they're saying that you have panic attacks, and and they're saying, so that means it's anxiety driven, and therefore you hyperventilate and things like that. That now they're treating me with that. They're giving me medication for that, and dealing with the allergic reactions that go along with that. You have doctors that will try and add diagnosis because they get, not only do they get kickbacks in some form or fashion, but they also get kickbacks on the medications that they write because they're getting a commission. Now, they may not call it a kickback; they may call it normal part of doing business. But if they're getting some form of compensation for writing a prescription, then it is considered a kickback, and therefore it is a conflict of interest, especially when you're trusting somebody to deal with the chemistry of your body. Now, you also get to look at how much of a stress that the mental health crisis not only puts on homelessness, but it also puts on the emergency services system. Because, as you could tell, they're not properly diagnosing, they're not properly dealing with the issue and working on ways to be able to mitigate it, to be able to deal with it. So then what happens is you get stuck going to the emergency room, and then you go what I like to call the nut ward. In the nut ward, you essentially, you're in a padded room, you get to eat really good, you get a lot of sleep, you get to be by yourself, and you kind of get to decompress because all of the world is coming down on you. But the thing is that there's so many people that are using that because the mental health professionals are not doing their job properly, that now the only way you can get into any type of emergency services if you're having a crisis, because it's being mismanaged by the people that you're trusting to actually manage it. Now all of a sudden you can't get into the hospital for crisis intervention unless you want to, take a flight off a bridge and see if you're just as good as a flying squirrel. Okay, and squirrels can fly, but humans can't. Okay, so with that being said, the mental health crisis is being done this way by design. And so we're sitting there and we're looking at, and now you have society, and this is the other part of the equation. So now you have society, and they look at homelessness, and they're going, okay, these people have mental health issues, and they need to go get their issue fixed, and they need to deal with it, and they need to start taking their pills, and then they go to court, and then they end up getting forced to take pills by court order. But those pills, in a lot of instances, aren't actually doing the proper thing because they were improperly diagnosed by doctors that had no business of even practicing within the medical profession, but somehow got a government job. Okay, and so you're having to deal with people, even my ex-wife, my parents even, oh yeah, you need to take your medication. Well, you know what? They were giving me the wrong medication the whole time to begin with. And every time I kept saying something. And I'll tell you a personal story, okay? Because this is how crucial your medication really is. All right, so in 2013, my mom calls me up and says, my medication, there's something wrong with it. They changed it. It's having a weird interaction with me. And so her and I end up, she ends up paying for a bus ticket back. I go and start talking to her pharmacist and start talking to her doctor. Well, one day her and I had a little bit of an argument. And from that argument, I had to go do something. I come back the next day, and she had taken her own life. And a couple of days later, when I got a call from the pharmacist, I went up to the pharmacist and I'm like, yeah, well, he's like, oh, I finally got an answer to all those questions for you. And I said, well, that's great, but she just passed away a couple of days ago. And he says, yeah, okay, well, I'm sorry to hear for your loss, but here's the answer to your question, because I wanted to know what he found out, because, he done the work. It turns out that my mom, because she had a physical ailment as well called fibromyalgia, and so they were giving her muscle relaxers and painkillers. Plus, not only that, the reason why she was on disability to begin with was for bipolar manic depression. And so when she started her manic phase, she would go into depression. And that's kind of where the tendencies of what she did comes from. Well, it turns out that these muscle relaxers also have antidepressants in them on top of the antidepressants in which she was already taking. And what is the number one side effect that you've got to worry about when it comes to taking antidepressants? They say this very loud, very clear, and very slow on every one of these commercials that talk about antidepressants. Okay, so you can kind of see what happens. And if the mental health industry and the doctors, they're not talking together, they're not working together, it's all so individualistic that the people that are getting hurt the most are also the ones that society is therefore doubling down on and being more spiteful, vindictive, cruel, and mean to the homeless for various reasons because of their own uneducated prejudice. And so when you really look at it and go, yeah, we've got mental health. We just need to have more mental health professionals. That's not necessarily the solution. Now, I'll tell you what ended up working for me. I ended up coming across a guy by the name of Billy Meyer. And the important lessons in which he taught me was the law of cause and effect. For everything that you do, it will be done back to you. So if you're a jerk to someone, someone else may be a jerk to you, and you earned it because what you give, you get. And when you look at the world that way and then you start taking your own accountability for your own actions, that in itself will make a huge difference. That will weed out the societal screw ups because society has screwed us up and taught us certain bad habits in order for it to continue to make its profit and to do the things in which it does. Okay, so in order for them to sell you a water filter, they've got to tell you that either you need it for hiking and you could get sick, which is fear, or there's going to be a natural disaster or the world's going to fall apart and you're not going to have clean drinking water, which again is fear. Okay, and so what they're doing is they're tapping into your fear. Now, what kind of psychological effect does that have? How does that affect the younger generation? How does that affect certain people? Because we have people that are very strong mentally and we have people that are not so strong mentally, and we're not really looking at the cause and effect. Okay, so this is what I have to say on this subject. I hope you learned a little bit. Don't forget to become a subscriber if you're not. Don't forget to share, like. Everything else is down in the description. If you find value in this, come on over to Patreon, leave me a tip in my tip jar. All right, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.